Welcome to the Historical Romance Sampler Podcast. I'm your host, Katherine Grant, and each week I introduce you to another amazing historical romance author. My guest reads a little sample of their work, and then we move into a free-ranging interview. If you like these episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the Historical Romance Sampler wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Now, let's get into this week's episode. I'm very excited to have today Addy Du Lac. Born and raised in the Rainbow Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago, Addy moved to the U.S. with her mother and elder sister at the age of 12. She was introduced to historical romance in high school through Julia Quinn and Lisa Kleypas, and began writing historical romance while she received a double major in history and creative writing from the University of South Florida. In 2024, her debut novel, One Season with the Duke, won 3 Emma Awards for Debut Author of the Year, Best Interracial Romance, and Best Book of the Year. She enjoys crafting books with diverse characters and steamy happy endings. When Addy isn't plotting her next series or fighting through a new novel, she enjoys watching movies and Asian dramas, traveling, and tempting her fate with new recipes. And when we did a panel together in Georgia, I learned you also love a jigsaw puzzle.
I love me a jigsaw puzzle. The collection's in another room, but the jigsaw puzzle is a problem. Yeah.
Addy, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I am really excited to hear a sample of the book that you brought today, Miss Mason's Secret, Baron.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What should we know about the story?
So it's the second of my Troublemakers trilogy. The first one is Miss Thornfield's Daring Bargain. This one focuses on Regina. Her dad's a military man. Her parents got married. It was one of those military marriages in India. So her mother is Marathi and her father is English. And at some point, the father manages to arrange a marriage between his daughter and Barony. And what he manages to do is put in a marriage contract that says that the engagement is between her daughter and the Baron of Stockholm. So it is not to a particular person, it is to the title. So he managed to set up this contract in India when she was around 12 years, like 12, 15 years old. So from that moment on, her family sort of moves to England, and she's been a baroness in training since that time. However, what's been happening is the heirs keep dying. So Regina, from the time that she was engaged to now, they've been like 3 or 4 fiancés. So it's sort of spiraled, not quite out of control, but it's spiraled just a little bit. And she's sort of waiting now for this person who inherits this title to come and execute this contract and marry her and make her a baroness so she could move on with her life. So that's the setup for her. And we have Leo, who is, honestly, he's just trying to mind his business, but he's gotten sort of roped in to this other barony that he just discovered that he's sort of a lost heir to this barony, and he's actually the last of this line. And while he's trying to figure out whether he wants to even deal with that drama and take on that kind of a legacy, he's sort of faced with Regina. And now he's like, maybe I could. Maybe it could be a good idea, kind of situation.
Awesome. With them. All right, well, I'm excited to hear the sample.
Chapter 4, Her Majesty's Theatre, Haymarket, London, 1852. It had been over a year since Regina had been to the theatre. In the previous year, Ada's trouble had resulted in Regina's season being cut short. After their adventure to Gretna Green, her parents had snatched her back to the country, where she was meant to wait until her fiancé returned. They'd only returned to London this season in anticipation of her fiancé's arrival, which they now knew wouldn't happen, not until they knew who the new one would be. An evening with Ellie, while their parents grew more closely acquainted, opened up so many new possibilities. She didn't know why they hadn't done this before. She knew that Ellie and Ada had managed to spend more time together because their families were less restrictive, unlike her parents. She had only ever wanted to be Ellie's friend and had never truly considered using her father as a connection to better her own standing. But now she wondered how much of her life over the past years could have been different. In her excitement, she'd chosen one of the dresses she'd managed to get past her mother, a gown of rich cerulean silk with a godipati of gold and silver and a floral motif along the neckline and a broad border at the hem of each blouse. It was an indulgence, like her favorite bonnet, something that showed a little more of who she was, or perhaps who she wanted to be, who she hoped she would be after all was said and done. The excitement she felt had even extended to her mother, who had forgotten for the first time in Regina's life check what Regina was wearing before they had arrived at the theatre. Regina had left her cloak on until the last minute, when she had been forced to remove it at the theatre in full view of her mother's eagle eye had gone directly to the unmistakably Indian design. But before she could speak, the Viscount had commented on it in glowing terms. Regina couldn't be sure it was a victory, but for the moment at least, there wasn't anything to be done about it. If enough positive feedback got to her mother, perhaps, Regina would be able to wear more of these designs this season. It would be a kind of freedom, even if much of her life was still decided. Tonight, she wouldn't worry about that. Tonight, she would enjoy being able to wear this dress and relish the opera with her friend. Her eyes drifted over the assembly of patrons around her. Some were familiar, most were not. She'd been in this theatre once before, but never in an area like this. These gilt seats were upholstered in red velvet, and this performance was the premiere of the latest opera by Giuseppe Verdi. "What is this one about, Ellie?" she asked. "Well, I believe it was based on a book by Alexandre Dumas' son, La Dame aux Camélias. Have you read it?" "No. It's about a fallen woman, Violetta, who finds love too late. Sad, but probably realistic." "Indeed, but the music should be good. Thank goodness for those Italian lessons, eh?" Regina joked, nudging Ellie with her elbow. "If only Ada was here, it would be a perfect evening, indeed. Although she's likely already seen it." "That is very true. At this point, when she returns, we will be able to discuss it with her instead of staring like country bumpkins." The lights flickered and they turned their attention to the stage. As Elodia predicted, the music was wonderful, but what struck Regina the most was Violetta's quandary between freedom and love. The idea that being caught between what seemed to serve her best and what her heart cried out for once she tasted it. She heard Elodia gasp beside her and turned to her. "What is it, Ellie?" "He's here," she whispered, her gloved hands clenched in her lap, her eyes fixed across from their seat one row down. When she saw the object of her focus, her own breath caught in her throat. There, in the dim light of the torches, sat Ada's brother, Mr. Thornfield, and beside him was Mr. Kingston. His gaze was fixed on the stage, his brow furrowed in concentration as he leaned on the armrest of his chair, one strong hand covering his full mouth. Every time she saw him, she was struck anew by how handsome he was, and how attractive every part of him was to her. How much she liked the way he looked at her, the way he appreciated her as she was. Could she find that with the man she was destined to marry? Was it possible that the white man who would no doubt inherit the barony, and her along with it, would see her as a boon instead of a burden? On the stage, Alfredo's voice rang out, reminding the heroine of her opportunity to taste what she'd never experienced before, with a person of pure heart and intention. Violetta's voice faltered as the ache of longing sprang to life, and in Regina's own heart, a treacherous seed of yearning took root. She forced herself to look down at her hands and then back to the stage. She tried to focus on understanding the Italian instead of recalling every detail of every encounter she'd ever had with Leo Kingston. "Oh," Elodia murmured, and Regina glanced over in time to see her nod in Mr. Thornfield's direction. He returned the gesture to her and Regina, and she glanced at Mr. Kingston, see those eyes fixed on her. Her heart thudded in her chest. at the impact of his stare. He nodded as well before returning his attention to the stage. Could she be disappointed? Did it make sense? He owed her nothing. They'd met only twice before. What had she hoped for? Her heart was thumping away in her chest. She could feel his gaze on her skin, and the tingling in her belly moved lower, forcing her to press her legs together. It was terrifying and exhilarating to have his interest, even if it was only polite. It was maddening to have her body react in such a way to someone she knew full well she couldn't have, someone who had no interest in her outside of passing acquaintance. The first half ended, and the curtain mercifully closed as the audience broke into scattered applause. Oh, they've left, Elodia said. What? Regina's head snapped up to see the empty seat Mr. Kingston had once sat in. She wasn't disappointed. She wasn't. She didn't know the man for the love of Christ. Perhaps it was a mercy. The last thing she needed was more distraction. Then Elodia stiffened behind her. Oh Lord, he's coming over Gigi. Regina's head snapped up, her body went cold with shock. What? Good evening, gentlemen, Elodia said with a bright smile. Papa, you remember Mr. Kingston and of course Mr. Thornfield? Of course. Good evening, gentlemen, Lord Melbrook said. Mr. Thornfield, you must already be familiar with my guest. But Mr. Kingston, allow me to introduce Captain and Mrs. Mason, and their eldest daughter, Miss Regina Mason. Good evening to you all, he said, giving them a smart bow. Mr. Kingston, I believe I saw you on the platform that day last year, did I not? Captain Mason said with a curious head tilt. Her father remembered him? Of course the father remembered him. The man had a mind like a steel trap. I believe so, but it was hardly a formal introduction by any means. No, more like guerrilla warfare. Mr. Kingston pressed his lips together as if fighting back a smile. As you say, sir. Her father turned to her mother. Mr. Kingston was instrumental in safeguarding Mr. Thornfield's life and the former Miss Thornfield's dignity. Yes, he was, Mr. Thornfield confirmed. He was also the reason my Ellie was returned to me so quickly when she was taken last year, the Viscount added with a nod of admiration. It seems like more than one person is indebted to you, Mr. Kingston, Regina's mother said. That is true, but none are present here. What I did was in the service of a friend. How gallant of you. Her expression seemed almost convinced, but Regina knew better than to read anything more to it. Do you enjoy the opera, Mr. Kingston? Regina asked, hoping her voice sounded as steady as she imagined, even though her stomach was a mess of nerves. I do in general, Miss Mason. How do you find this one? Intriguing. I'm not one for romance in general, but this one isn't terrible. It was better to be honest. Her parents would certainly know the truth. A young woman who isn't a fan of romantic tales. How very peculiar, Mr. Thornfield said with clear amusement. She smiled. Yes, it would seem odd to him. But Regina had never been interested in hurting herself for the sake of curiosity. Romance would have no place in the life she was going to live, and she had no interest in tasting it even vicariously. I'm a peculiar sort of female. You're in good company tonight. My companion here is less than enthused himself. He cast a frustrated glance at Mr. Kingston. Oh? What faults do you find with it? She asked. Was he a kindred spirit? Is the subject matter too shocking? Elodia chimed in. Mr. Kingston shot an annoyed glance at his friend before chuckling and shaking his head. Regina's breath caught in her throat. That laugh. She was losing her mind. Well, I confess I much prefer comedies myself, he replied. How peculiar of you, Regina teased, and he crinkled his nose in mock protest. Perhaps. But I've dealt with enough tragedy in my line of work. When I pay to be entertained, I prefer a happy ending. Whereas I live for drama as an escape from mundane leisure, Richard joked. You do not believe that art should hold a mirror up to the world, Mr. Kingston? The Viscount asked. I have no objection to it in principle, but for myself I'd much rather laugh than cry. Especially in public, Ellie teased. And Mr. Thornfield snickered before wagging his finger and squinting at the ceiling in consideration. You make a fine point, Miss Hawthorne. Imagine spending all that time on your toilet only to ruin your hard work with a rogue opera. What a tragedy, she lamented with a grin of futility. Oh dear. Are you in danger of a public emotional exhibition, Mr. Kingston? Regina asked, wondering how Elodia was able to speak so easily with Mr. Thornfield, a man she was clearly in love with. Mr. Kingston chuckled and shook his head. Not tonight, Miss Mason. I believe it's time to return to our seats to further witness the tragic futility. Such is always the way. I shall bid you all good night then, Mr. Thornfield said before bowing and leaving their box. Mr. Kingston followed suit, meeting her eyes for a moment before he left, and Regina returned the gesture, watching greedily as he strolled away with his friend. Even his walk was attractive. What on earth was this? Could it be mere attraction? Was it that powerful? He is a cheerful fellow, Mr. Mason commented. Who thought him? He is rather, but don't let it fool you, Lord Melbrook replied. What do you mean by that, Papa? Elodia asked. Only that he's not as straightforward as he likes to appear. It was true. Ada's brother wielded his charm in a way that was calculated without being harmful. She didn't hold it against him. She had to do the same in her own way, far too often. She imagined Mr. Kingston's humility was another way to play to the crowd, in order to avoid too much scrutiny. How else could his refusal to accept credit for his actions the year before be explained? Few people are, Regina replied without thinking, as she watched him, and Mr. Kingston would take this. Oh? Captain Mason asked. Regina glanced over to see 4 pairs of eyes staring at her, 3 inquisitive and 1 knowing and wary. I only meant that it is the price of engaging in society, is it not? We none of us can be truly who we are all the time. I suppose that's true enough, the father replied. Indeed, Miss Mason said, watching Regina with cool consideration. Mr. Kingston is quite the hero. Regina met her stare evenly but said nothing. She knew. Somehow her mother knew who her mind had begun drifting towards. If her voice wavered, it would steal the carpet. He's a good sort, Elodia said. Very clever and discreet. A military man as well, by his account, Lord Melbrook added. Oh, which battalion? Captain Mason asked, his interest piqued. I didn't get that far into the introduction. Perhaps I can invite him to dinner next week and you can have the opportunity to ask. Very good, her father nodded with his typical cheerful grin. Regina turned to face the stage and forced herself to keep her eyes on the performance she was lucky to witness, and not on the man across from their box.
What a fun little scene that's got
Yeah,
banter, it's got meta commentary on
yeah.
narrative fiction, it's got everything. I've got a lot of questions for you, but first we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors. Hey, audiobook listeners! Have you checked out the official Historical Romance Sampler Season 1 playlist on Libro.fm? On the playlist, you'll find historical romances you heard here first that are available to listen to on Libro.fm. Plus, if you're not yet a Libro.fm subscriber, use code HISTORICAL to get extra credits in your first month. Head on over to the Historical Romance Sampler Linktree to learn more. I'm back with Addy Du Lac, who just read a very fun sample from Miss Mason's Secret Baron. And like I said before the break, this was a really interesting scene because you were juxtaposing what's going on with the characters by having them watch Verdi's opera and comment on it. And Regina even has the explicit thought of how the opera has this theme of freedom versus love. And she doesn't anticipate finding herself in that quandary, but she can relate to it so deeply. So let's just start with like what called to you to tell the story of Regina, who is kind of trapped in a marriage to someone who she doesn't even know who she's going to marry.
I love an arranged marriage. I love that trope. I think it's so juicy. I love the idea of strangers being forced together and like by virtue of their sort of by dumb luck of their personalities or by virtue of, you know, just things, them being the kind of people who are solution focused. Like they find a way through and they're able to discover this person and realize, okay, maybe you don't suck. Maybe maybe you're not the worst thing ever, right? And with Regina, I knew that I wanted to have an arranged marriage where it's sort of there's always, especially in Asian dramas, there's always like a secret, millionaire, always is like some kind of thing where he's like a secret heir. So when I was working on Regina's story, especially because I had already decided that she was going to be South Asian, I knew I wanted her to be an arranged marriage. But I wanted it to be a sort of arranged marriage with a twist, right? And I liked playing with the idea of her being trapped, but at the same time not, she hasn't lost her agency because, I mean, when you read the book, as you read it, she's not pitiful. She doesn't pity herself. She doesn't see herself as a victim. She doesn't have any of that self pity going on. She understands the function of what she's been called to do, and she has come to sort of embrace it because the value of what she's able to present, it matters to her. It matters to her that by becoming a baroness, she will be able to give a little more protection and give a little more influence, not necessarily to her father, but to her mother and her little sister. She has this, she sees herself as like working in partnership with her father to finally be able to really protect their family. The reality of the situation is in their home, they're safe and they're happy and they can have this very warm family. But the minute they step outside of that house, it's a problem, right? Everything about them becomes a problem. And them living in India, it was easier because they're brown people, they're Indian people everywhere. They had their own social circle. But then they moved to England, and now her mother sticks out like a sore thumb. She sort of witnesses, oh God, this is what I can help. This is what I can do for my family. And it was very important to me that she not be, even though, the arranged marriage and the, oh no, part of is in Bollywood, but I didn't want her to feel sort of like melodramatic. I didn't want her to feel like, or I didn't want the audience to read her and be like, oh no, this poor girl, even though on a way you do, she doesn't need to be saved in that way. If she actually does have to marry this fiance, and he turns out he's not the man of her dreams, he's never going to be Leo. But say he's not the man of her dreams, she's like, I'll work with this. That was the first part of it. Was like I had to figure out Regina and what kind of person she was and what kind of steel she's made of. And then once I had that sorted out, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be funny if it ended up being Leo? What if I ended up pairing all these suckers off? Because that wasn't the original plan. Leo was supposed to show up and then leave.
Uh-huh.
And then I was like, but what if I can? So then I put it in there and then I said, oh my God, this will be so interesting because he's a person who is once I figured out who he was, I was like, okay, he's not going to want this. This is the opposite of everything that, not only everything that he is, but it's the opposite of everything that he values. He values hard work. He values like earning your space. He values respect and like he has these things and he's managed to get it for himself. And now he's being offered something that would technically give him more respect, but it is not earned. It is the opposite of earned. It is entitlement, literally and figuratively. And he's just like, ew, no, like that's horrible. But then it's sort of both of them are in that position where it's like the things that they value could be at risk if they strike out in this new path.
Now, I'm curious because in your bio it mentions you have a dual degree in history and creative writing. So the genre doesn't always reflect it, but there is a strong historical record that families like Regina's, were in London and all of that. What was your approach? Did you do a lot of research into it, or did you kind of
Mhm.
bring, imagination to it? And where does research fit into your creative process?
So what I tend to do is I sort of figure out the story that I want to tell. It's sort of like I have a hypothesis of what I would like to do, but now I need to go see if there's any data to back up exactly what I have in mind, or if I have to adjust something to match something else, right? So, like, for example, I was already well versed in the fact that England and England they'd had troops over there, right? So that one it wasn't hard to figure that part out. But then I was trying to figure out, like, what did I want the father to be? It's tricky. I don't, there's the danger of sort of falling into like the colonizer oppressor sort of situation. When you do research into those things, you do find, yeah, you had these marriages that came up, and some of them were because they fell in love. Some of them, the women were forced to convert. Some of them, it was just these Indian families that are trying to maintain their position while, England is slowly like swallowing up India and sort of dismantling the typical power structure that they had there. But I wanted to have a situation where it's like he's not opposed to the marriage itself, but he also knows his fellow men and he knows the circumstances. He's not going to be some kind of special unicorn, but he has to have some sort of kernel of just straight up respectability as a human to see if there's a way for those parents to work. And then for Regina, that is when it became okay. As an immigrant, for me, the main thing that I could really trade in and understand is the sort of otherness of an experience, right? And especially when you've been living in your new home for an extended period of time, sometimes you don't always have the luxury of going back as often as you want. And now a new disconnect between the home that you left, but there's a disconnect that's still maintained in the place where you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that ended up shaping like how I knew I wanted the story to go. And across the board, it's that that is something that I know I can write because it's like, you know, it's part of my life and it's sort of part of my family. That's
Yeah.
that feeling. So I try to always like sort of hammer that home and make sure that that is a theme that goes across all of it, but everybody reacts to it differently, right? Some
Yeah.
people are just like, absolutely not. I'm gonna do me and you'll get over it, right? And then other people are like, if you can't beat them, join them. And then I will take over from the inside, right? And then I will dismantle it from the beginning, right? So Regina's more of a dismantle from the inside kind of situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, now is a good time to play Love It or Leave It. All right. Do you love it or leave it? Protagonists meet in the first 10% of the story.
Love it. Yeah,
Love it or love it or leave it. Dual point of view narration.
love it.
Love it or leave it. Third person past tense.
Love it. Is there another way to do this? I'm joking.
Love it or leave it. The third act breakup or dark moment.
Oh, love it. Yeah, get it juicy. I like getting people in their feelings. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Love it or leave it. Always end with an epilogue.
I love it. I think so because a lot of times with these stories, it's what the first 2, 3 months of a relationship. Like if it's extended, a lot of times it's like the first month, like they literally met on in the first part, and like by the end they're married. I like giving little snapshots into the future, whether it's kids or no kids, whether it's dogs, whether they travel somewhere else. Just a little something for people to see that things are still going okay, you know.
Yeah. Love it or leave it. Always share research in your author's note.
This is tricky. There, so I'll say this. If it's research based on something that people are gonna complain about, I say love it. For example, in this one, I have them watching La Traviata, but La Traviata, he didn't even write it until 1853. And this is set in 1852. So I knew it was wrong, but the opera was perfect. And it's still in the 1850s. It's not like it's from the 1920s or some stuff like that. So I was just like, they're watching it. Yes, I know. And I put that in my office note. I was like, yes, I understand. Yes, I know that it was wrong. I needed it for artistic reasons. Let it go. Move on with your life.
All right. So only when you're breaking the historical record.
Yeah. When you know you are.
Well, and are there any other romance rules that I didn't ask about that you like to break?
It follows sort of the same thing where it's the idea that the function of historical romance is not necessarily to be historically accurate, right? Because the point of it is to write a good book that is grounded well enough in a historical setting. So To me, like I will have, which is not really, I don't think it's a rule, but I feel like some readers find it to be a rule where they could make out in public. Is it going to be a problem? Sure. But are they going to be married when they're doing it? Probably. At which point it's like, is it necessary? Is it something that would happen? I don't know. I'm not from the Victorian England. Like, would it be in the historical record if married couples were showing affection to their partner in public?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't see every aspect of historical accuracy, even as a historian. There are certain rules that can be bent, and there's certain rules that can be broken. If it is not going to fundamentally affect the reality of the role that the person is fulfilling, anything like that, I say do what you want. I
All
like doing
right.
something.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
Where can listeners find you and your books?
So you can find me pretty much everywhere. You can find me on TikTok and my TikTok, Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. My handles on TikTok and Instagram are Addy Du Lac underscore author. And you should be able to find me there. My website is addydulacauthor.net.
Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much. This has been a really
Thank
fun
you
conversation.
for having me. I appreciate it.
That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the Historical Romance Sampler wherever you listen, and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Until next week, happy reading!